Coming up on Why Should I Trust You? A battle is raging right now between two forces who have forever worked side by side, until now. On one side, the Department of Health and Human Services. On the other, the American Academy of Pediatrics. At stake is something fundamental: how America protects the health and well-being of its children. The AAP, as it's known, has now broken with the CDC, no longer endorsing the CDC's recommendations for childhood vaccinations. Today, we're speaking with a top leader from the AAP, Dr. Susan Kressly, about how we got here. So, how did we get here? What led to this fight? Why are more than half the states and pediatricians everywhere turning their backs on the CDC, refusing to follow the HHS's guidelines on vaccines? And HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is pushing hard for more doctor-parent engagement around certain vaccines. Is that such a bad thing? Why or why not? And most importantly, what are parents to do in this moment? There's a lot to unpack, so let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Hey guys.
It is so good to be back. I am Brenda Adhikari.
I'm Tom Johnson.
I'm Maggie Bartlett.
And I'm Dr. Mark Abdimalik.
Yeah, so we have a scorcher of a show today. We're looking at the standoff between the HHS and the American Academy of Pediatrics, known as the AAP. And it's most keenly illustrated through the AAP's break in aligning with the CDC's vaccine recommendations. There's also this lawsuit against the HHS that the AAP has brought on, which we're going to tell you about in a second. You've got the AAP boycotting these immunization meetings known as ACIP. And it's a lot of like word salad here, but for those who know, you know, right? And you've got the AAP urging its nearly 70,000 pediatricians, along with state lawmakers from around the country, to not follow Secretary Kennedy and his team's recommendations on immunization for our kids. I mean, the fault lines couldn't be clearer. So, yeah, we've got a good one today.
Yeah, Brenda, and this is coming on the heels of our interview with Dr. Kirk Milhone, which was a few episodes back. You may remember he is the current chair of the ACIP committee, and he came on our show a few weeks ago and laid out his vision for America's vaccination plans, what they want to look at, how parents should approach, what public health means, all of this stuff that is in direct conflict with some of what we're going to hear today, probably with Dr. Susan Kressly.
Yeah, and before we jump in, just a reminder, you guys can always reach out to us at questions@whyshoulditrustyou.net. We love it. We read all your messages, and do check out our Substack.
So in a few moments, we're going to be bringing on Dr. Susan Kressly. And real quick, Maggie, tell us a little bit about her.
Yeah, so she's on the board of directors at the AAP, and she just wrapped her term as president at the end of December. So she's been serving as president, or was serving as president, as Kennedy came to lead HHS and throughout all of the stuff that has gone down since.
She'll be a really interesting voice to talk to. But Tom, before we bring in Dr. Kressly, just paint us a picture of where we're at.
Yeah, it's pretty head spinning. As you laid out, we've got HHS throwing around accusations of conflicts of interest at AAP. We've got AAP claiming HHS is making decisions with a complete lack of scientific rigor and transparency. You've got HHS trying to withhold funding from AAP. And like we said, more than half the states are now saying they're going to follow AAP's guidance on what to do about vaccines and the schedule for vaccines rather than the CDC's guidance. You got other states that are saying we're going to follow some or even all of what the CDC is saying. So it sort of depends on where you live, what kind of guidance you might be getting. But in the middle of all this, we've got a lot of dazed and confused parents watching a sort of tennis match, and we can only imagine they're confused about who to trust. So we're going to kind of walk through this, and we've got a lot of questions for her. But first, let's look at all this through the lens of this AAP-HHS fight. So the American Academy of Pediatrics, joined by groups like the American Medical Association, launched a lawsuit against Kennedy's Department of HHS. And they were arguing that his vaccine policy and other changes that were afoot were not just wrong, but potentially illegal. And the case began back in July. And that was after HHS rewrote the COVID vaccine guidelines. And it's since grown. and it sparked a war with HHS, who's accused the AAP group of being, quote unquote, owned by Pharma. And it led to HHS actually cutting federal funding to AAP. And they said, the organization's research priorities no longer were in line with the administration's. Judges then come in and restored the funding, but you get the sense that this is a real back and forth fight now. The most recent escalation, though, we really want to underline this, came in January. And that's, of course, when Kennedy's HHS bypassed ACIP and overhauled the childhood vaccine schedule, basically taking our 17 universally recommended vaccines and changing that and saying, now 6 of those we're going to be in a new category called this shared clinical decision-making. It stops short of recommending them, all of them, but it says you got to have discussions between doctor and parent before any decisions made on that group of vaccines. AAP jumps in and labeled the move as egregious and reckless. And the lawsuit contends that not only the conclusions that HHS made here were wrong, but that the way they did it was wrong. And then AAP announced that they are not only rejecting this new vaccine schedule from CDC, but that they are going to endorse their own recommendations, which were the old recommendations. And they were basically encouraging doctors across the country, as well as state lawmakers, to ignore what CDC is recommending about vaccines and stick with what AAP is putting their stamp of approval on.
I mean, Tom, this is something that's never happened before. I mean, typically the AAP and the CDC would be sitting at the table collaborating on all of this together, and that is no longer happening. So let's take a look at it from the perspective of pediatricians, the front lines, the 67,000 pediatricians and pediatric providers who are, out there with parents holding their hands. So first of all, among all of this chaos, if there's any glimmer here, there's a survey that tells us that 85% of patients say that they trust their child's pediatrician on vaccine. So it's still a specialty in medicine that has a high score on the trust metric. Yet there is this accusation that we hear that pediatricians are pushing vaccines to pad their profits, make money. Their news site, Stat, just published the results from a 6-month investigation into this very question. They wanted to know, do pediatricians make large profits from vaccines? And they report that after analyzing health insurance and government reimbursement data, they concluded that is not true. In fact, they say that the data shows that for many pediatricians, vaccines are a financial burden on the practice, the overhead, the costs. They don't get reimbursed for the amount of money and time they spend on vaccines. So we're going to ask Dr. Kressly directly about this issue. And then there's the parents, right? So you have a newborn, you have a lot of anxiety about getting a shot. And we've talked about the fact that while trust in vaccines and pediatricians remains high, right now we are seeing 1 in 6 parents delaying or skipping vaccines for their kids. So what happens when a parent decides not to vaccinate or skip a vaccine? There's a lot of, policies in pediatric offices and consents that you have to sign. KFF and the Washington Post got at some of this with a recent poll. They found that 23% of parents who skipped or delayed vaccines said their provider was not supportive of that. 44% of those parents said they felt unfairly pressured. So for parents who choose not to vaccinate, we hear it a lot. They may get dropped by their pediatrician's practice and have to go elsewhere. So we have a lot to discuss with our guest.
Yeah, I feel like we have to draw a chart, you guys, of all the different little pieces here for people to follow that bouncing ball. So we are going to we want to get into all of that with Dr. Susan Kressly of the AAP, and that's coming right up. Okay, welcome back. And a big Why Should I Trust You welcome to Dr. Susan Kressly. Susan, until like 5 minutes ago, was the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics. She is a board-certified pediatrician with over 30 years of clinical experience. In addition to all of that, she has worked for years in the health technology space, advocating for children in the space of information technology. Welcome to Why Should I Trust You, Dr. Kressly.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
So first of all, I want to start by saying you were the president of the AAP, but the reason we're having you on is because you were, pardon my French, kind of in the shit for the last year with all the stuff that's been happening with the new HHS in terms of AAP. You've kind of been in it for the past year, and it really feels like a standoff, Dr. Kressly, between AAP in the HHS. Is that what it feels like to you?
No, I think it feels hard, but there is always the AAP and pediatricians are always willing to work with anyone who's interested in advancing child health. And actually, there are many things that we agree with the HHS agenda. We have a policy on healthy eating. We have policies on forever chemicals. We have policies on things, clean air and safe environments for children. And so there's a whole piece of the agenda of advancing child health, which has gotten a little lost in the conversation about the areas where we do disagree, which is the importance of vaccines and keeping children safe and healthy in their communities. But being a pediatrician is always hard. So it may have felt different. I always tell people we didn't change. The environment around us changed. And just like parents step up to meet the moment when things are challenging with their kids, we stepped up to do whatever is needed to protect every child.
Yeah, what we've observed is between the lawsuit, between HHS trying to withhold funds from AAP, between the AAP boycotting ACIP, it feels like there is this real palpable tension. Let's start with the lawsuit. Tell us a little bit about it. You're basically, from our understanding, you're telling nearly 70,000 pediatricians across America to not listen to the CDC. I mean, that is huge.
It's sad. But again, we didn't change. They started eliminating the experts from the room, and when the facts don't lead to their recommendations, children deserve better, and so we stepped up. So I would just want to say the legal levers that we used did not come lightly. It was not a slam dunk. There were a lot of hard conversations in the room of the board of directors. Our board of directors of 16 people represents people from across the country. We have to unanimously agree before we vote. That's a pediatrician for you. If we don't agree, we're not done talking. And that means at the board level, and that means also how do we get to the place where we can do what's best for every child. And so we decided that we had to use every tool within our toolbox. We're good about education. We're good about advocacy and talking to people so that they are well informed. We had we used other levers, and I'm just going to say that I thank God every day I didn't go to law school. I'm leaving the legal maneuvers to the people who do that for a living. To us, it was just a tool, one other tool in our toolbox that we are using to protect children.
Let's dig into the changes in policies around vaccines. We had Kirk Milhoan, the head of ACIP, on, and he defended the changes that HHS made, even though it didn't involve his committee. And he said this is about informed consent. It was lacking. Parents weren't feeling it. They weren't. They don't feel like they were being engaged by doctors. It was all sort of happening around them. And, they'd blink and their child was vaccinated. I cannot imagine you are against robust informed consent, right?
Yeah, so I want to be really clear here because word choice matters. And we have to be very careful because sometimes we're saying the same word, but we mean different things. And so I'm a big Ted Lasso fan, be curious, not judgmental. What do you mean by that, right? And so when I talk to families and even my own family about this, because they're like, what's up? Making decisions for children in exam rooms and in clinics has always been about a conversation. This is especially true for pediatricians because the patient themselves is not the person who can consent. So there's always been robust conversation. Some of us are better at it than others. And quite frankly, we are sharpening our skills to be better reflective listeners we know the House of Medicine is very good at interrupting people. We have to be curious questioners and sit and listen to what families are saying to us, meet them where they are, and then partner with them and really to help them understand we are on this journey with them. They are the experts in their child. We have special expertise, experience, and knowledge through all of our training and the years that we've been in practice. And together, those two things are the most powerful tool to advance the health of every child. And so let's go back to the word choice about consent, right? Consent to lawyers means one thing, to parents means another thing, to doctors mean you can have implied consent. When you walk into my office, I think that means that you want me to deliver care. There's nothing necessarily. Then there's signed consent, which lots of us do when patients become new patients. And there's informed consent. How do you inform a 4-year-old? You can't, so it's the parent. And then it's even more complicated in pediatrics because a lot of kids have more than one parent or guardian, and sometimes they don't agree. And so it is the conversation around consent to treat, to give care, has always been at the fundamental core of pediatrics. Mm-hmm. But what happened with going from consent to shared decision-making? So let's just be, if you're going to take this from having a conversation with my 10-year-old grandson and his mom, what does it mean to consent? Because we teach kids about consent, right? Like that's part of what we teach in the exam room. You have the right to say no as an autonomous being if, Aunt Susie wants to give you a hug and you don't want to be hugged. You have the right to consent. So teaching consent is part of what we do when we take that really seriously. And so the consent and sharing in those decisions to consent and what is the best option for you is a dialogue that's ongoing. Shared decision-making, that phrase means totally different things depending on who you want to talk to.
And just to clarify for our audience, that is the new category that these handful of vaccines were moved into. We no longer universally recommend them as a conversation. We're going to put them into this shared clinical decision-making category. So you find that to be an onerous category? Do you find that to be, it's not really about shared decision-making? It's about something else?
It's problematic because we're not all speaking, what does it mean? So if I'm talking to family members and patients and their parents, shared decision is a fundamental part of what we do. I make a recommendation with what I think is best for your child. Often I will tell you it's exactly what I would do for my own child and grandchildren because I don't know how to practice better medicine than to do for your kid what I would do for my own. And so here's my recommendation. And then we have a shared conversation to make a decision. He's sick today. I'd like to not give it. Can I come back next week? We have that dialogue and we share in a decision about an outcome. That is to what most people shared decision-making. In medicine, it has a completely different meaning. This is why we're not speaking the same language. So shared decision-making in medicine is reserved for when two options are equally valid. So I like to take ear infection treatment as an example because most parents have been there, right? So it is absolutely reasonable in today's day and age. We know that a lot of ear infections in young kids are viral in origin. And so antibiotics don't help. And we know that antibiotics can have their own subset of side effects and risks in antibiotic resistant. And so it is reasonable if your child has an ear infection for us to recommend what we call watchful waiting, which is for 48 hours, give pain relief and fever relief. And if your child's not better in 48 hours, which is what the time it takes for most viruses to resolve, then we'll add an antibiotic at that time. But it is equally valid to say, your child's in daycare, they've already had 3 ear infections, I'm going to send you home with an antibiotic prescription. And I know parents are sitting out there going, how come sometimes I get a prescription and sometimes I don't? Those are two equally valid choices. And that for us is where you use shared clinical decision-making. To get a vaccine or not does not have equally, the risks and benefits are not the same. I can protect you from meningitis today by giving you the meningococcal vaccine, or you cannot get it, which means that your child is at risk for getting meningitis. Those risks are not equal. They are not equal choices, even if the risk is for a couple of days because you don't want to delay.
Dr. Kressly, I want to go back to how did we get here? How did we find ourselves in this situation where you're at odds with our health authorities. Let's talk about ACIP, and let's talk about what the AAP has said about ACIP. Is it a credible process? Were you invited to participate in it? Did you choose not to participate in it? Were you fired from participating in it? What actually happened? Why are our two amazing organizations, HHS and the AAP, why are they fighting?
I don't think we're fighting. I don't think we are aligned right now. I did not get the letter to not show up at these ACIP meetings. So some of this is what I've heard from the conversations around the academy. And I want to be clear to your listeners that there is nothing that would make my heart sing better than to get to a place where we're aligned and we are working on building our trust with each other and moving forward on behalf of kids. And there are places that we are working together, including some of the nutrition guidelines. But we were disinvited from the conversation. And so all of our ACIP work groups haven't met. Those are the work groups who talk before we get to the ACIP meeting. All of our people on the ACIP who had expertise were fired. I don't know logistically how it happened. And so when all of a sudden everybody is sort of the experts aren't in the room, you have to ask yourself, what's happening here? And I know that, and believe it or not, I like to think of myself as an innovator and disruptor. So at first it's like, all right, we're going to clean house and what have you. But then you have to stop and pause and say, okay, where is that expert voice coming from? Mm-hmm. And so I think that we have to also unpack what makes someone have knowledge and expertise that qualifies them to do their role, right? Yeah. Like, I'm not a virologist, right? And so we all depend on each other to have trusted relationships because we all have certain knowledge and expertise. Like, I wouldn't do brain surgery on a child because that's not my lane.
Right. We don't want you to do brain surgery, but we might want you at ACIP. But I want to go back here for a second. Did the AAP boycott it? Were you disinvited? We need to understand how we ended up in this situation if we're going to move forward.
So our members were fired from the committee and the work groups were disbanded. And so the question was, are you going to send somebody? And the question becomes, send somebody to do what?
So right? Did you boycott it?
That was not my decision. The Committee on Infectious Diseases, which are the people who make the pediatric recommendations on behalf of the American Academy of Pediatrics, looked at their resources and said, where can we have most impact? And they chose to stay in there to make sure they were shoring up their processes of grade and evidence to framework recommendations so that we could continue in parallel to produce something that was absolutely trusted, fact-based, expert-led. And instead of getting taking our resources to be part of a process that was not clear to us.
But Dr. Kressly, let me ask you on that, because I do think this is important. And you said it wasn't your decision, which I respect. I mean, isn't there a world in which the biggest body representing pediatricians and therefore, really having a hand in how vaccines are administered and how the conversation around vaccines takes place in this country, not being at ACIP also sends a signal that you aren't part of this conversation? I mean, you had people like Cody Meissner and others who were taking a stand against what some of the folks were saying at ACIP that were more aligned with perhaps Secretary Kennedy on this. Like, wouldn't that have been an opportunity to really voice your objection to some of these things?
I think it's a risk analysis that the decision makers made, and ultimately decided there also has to be trust in the process and trust of the other people, right? If you're going to work with other people to advance child, you have to understand what are you looking for from me? What's our role? Do we have influence? And none of those could be answered to our satisfaction. And so the trust in the process didn't happen. And so The leaders who are part of that work, which I'm a general pediatrician, I count on them to have the expertise, decided that it was better to use our resources elsewhere.
In terms of skating where the puck is, if there's a meeting that's happening in February in a couple of weeks, is there a way to find your way into that meeting? Should the AAP find a way to be there?
So nothing's off the table. But there's ongoing conversations and decision-making about who are the right people to put in the room and will they have impact. I mean, there are decisions made by HHS that weren't not even consulted by the ACIP, right? And so the whole process, if you don't trust the process and you don't trust what's coming out of it, if you're part of the work, what does that mean? There is a risk reward here, and the experts made the decision not to go.
But you guys so don't trust the process right now of ACIP, of
is there a
HHS.
process?
Right. But correct me if I'm wrong, but you're suing to stop ACIP from meeting in February, right? Like that's how deeply broken you think this process is?
Yeah, so I'm not in the weeds of the lawsuit, and I would rather talk about how we get forward. What we really want, our end goal, is get back to a functional, trusted, transparent process where experts are in the room, we're having civil conversations, we are disagreeing in respectful ways where people are challenging each other. That happened at the old ACIP meetings. If people went back and listened to the old recording, there would be epidemiologists and scientists saying, like, what about this signal and what about this? So I don't want families to think that this was a performative process. It was a robust body of experts who had incredible knowledge and had the goal of advancing every child's health in mind to make those decisions. That's what we want back.
Right now, you've got pediatricians across the country that are aligning with your organization and your recommendations. If there is a safety signal that pops up and you are decoupled from ACIP and you're recommending your own vaccine schedule, are you guys equipped to realize there's a safety signal and to change your recommendations? Like, where does this go if we've got two different groups with two different recommendations? And ultimately, like, where would a parent, how would you guide a parent to make a decision between these two different recommendations?
So what I say to parents, and let's boil this down to where it happens. Those decisions are made for individual children in the context of an office with hopefully a trusted partner in working with what the parents, using the parents' expertise about that child and our specific knowledge about child health. Those processes and those safety reporting systems so far, which are many government and pharmaceutical, are still happening. And so, yes, we are still getting information and we'll use it in our consideration. But what we really want is this to go back to something that we're working with shared goals in shared decision-making with our government partners so that we can get to a place where everybody's trust can be restored.
I put a question to you because we hear it a lot. And you, as we laid out, you are a pediatrician, as well as being this leader of this organization. There's an accusation that gets leveled that pediatricians are sort of padding their profits by giving vaccines, that they're pushing vaccines because this is a revenue source for them and a good revenue source for them. They profit off that. What's the truth about that?
It's wrong. It's not. And there's a lot of people who have done deep dives, and I don't want to take up the time to do that. And by the way, pharmaceutical companies can't pay physicians. That's a kickback and it's illegal. There's insurance companies and it's complex, but in many places in this country, pediatricians take a loss every time they give shots. Let me ask you a question. Where do you get your shots?
I used to get it personally at a pharmacy. I know that's becoming more difficult, but for my kids, it was the pediatrician's office.
No, but for adults,
yeah,
it's a pharmacy.
It's the pharmacy.
You know why? Because family docs and internists can't make money giving vaccines.
Got it.
And so because it is so important for us to keep kids safe and healthy, we keep doing it. It's a false narrative. Next question.
And pediatricians are not the best paid doctors out there.
They're the lowest. Public health is the only thing lower than us.
And are there enough pediatricians in this country?
No. So that's the other problem. And I want to unpack that a little bit, because the most important piece of this to me is in that exam room, and it's relational. And I think the House of Medicine should own a little bit our trying to make medicine transactional instead of relational. It's better for us as clinicians when we have relationships with our families. It's better for the families and the patients. It's better for everybody. But in the name of a lot of pressures, and we could have a whole different show on let's redesign healthcare delivery with families at the center, and I'd love to have that one. But that's not where we are right now. But the decisions should be made with families in the context of what's happening, and we need to work together, because it's a journey throughout the lifespan for kids to be able to thrive. But not every family has access to a pediatrician. And even those of you who do, I can imagine that sometimes you travel to remote places to go skiing or to go camping or to what have you. And you then sometimes may need to contact your pediatrician to have access to expert care. What if you're somewhere where there's no Wi-Fi signal and you can't log on your portal, or you can't we have to have both individual pediatricians having relationships with families and our policymakers and infrastructure understanding that clear recommendations together are both needed, individual and public health, in order to make sure that no matter where you are, in no matter what town, whether you're at home or on vacation, you have access to recommendations that's guided in compassion, because we care about your kid, in conversation with you, but it's backed by science and facts.
So, Dr. Kressly, you made a persuasive case for, the fact that pharmaceutical companies can't directly pay physicians. But pharmaceutical companies do directly sponsor the AAP. You've had Secretary Kennedy, who has really blasted the AAP for, and I'm reading from the Washington Post here, quote, for receiving funding from vaccine manufacturers and pharmaceutical companies. He's calling on the group to disclose conflicts of interest so that Americans may ask whether the AAP's recommendations reflect public health interest or are perhaps just a pay-to-play scheme. And I'm on your website right now, or I'm on the AAP's website, and it talks about current corporate and organizational supporters. And I truly just want to understand. Okay, it's saying here, corporate supporters of the AAP, Friends of Children Fund. It says President's Circle, people who donate $50,000 and above. Pfizer, Moderna, Sanofi, Abbott, $25,000 to $50,000. Eli Lilly, Genentech, GlaxoSmithKline. I mean, these are major vaccine manufacturers donating to the AAP. What am I supposed to think with that? That doesn't look good.
And so let me unpack that and just tell you that there are completely two different sides of the house in the AAP. There's the business of making clinical recommendations, which is completely divorced from Friends of the Children, which do things like fly in pediatricians so that they can learn about how to communicate better with their families around vaccines, or fly them in or create a space for a family partnership person to join one of our meetings to learn things. The clinical decision policy side of the house is completely financially separate from the Friends of the Children,
but it's all AAP, right?
Yep.
And also, this is when you say fly them in, are you saying a pediatrician would go meet with a vaccine manufacturer to talk about clinical decision making? Where is the pharmaceutical relationship here? And what does that money get the pharmaceutical maker?
Yeah, so you'd have to talk to the people who, from the financial guy side of the house, because I don't sit on that part of the ledger to look at it. But I can tell you that no, it's not to meet with manufacturers. There's work that gets done, education work, advocacy work, different from policy work that is funded by all people who are interested in advancing child health. And the vaccine people are a very small fraction of that.
Yeah. But Dr. Kressly, do you see on this, and I'm genuinely asking this as a good faith person, I used to, Tom, Mark still does, we worked for Network News, and we've gotten so much shit from people who are like, the vaccine manufacturers put these ads on television and it just looks icky. And I wish all those ads could be gone. Like, What is the best case defense for having these, like, does it sit well with you that you guys, and whether it's one half or the other, I'm going to tell you, to the public, it's all AAP. They don't give a shit if it's children's defense, whatever, right? To them, it's the AAP is taking money from drug makers. Does that sit well with you? Do you make a case? Maybe there's a really persuasive case for why it needs to be this way. I just don't get it.
Yeah. So my answer would be that I would love to go to a place where somehow someone miraculously gave us a lot of money to do what we need to do to advance child health. That's not the reality of the world that we live in. And so there's actually a whole framework around how you decide. And a former president or a friend of mine wrote something on how you have a shared values framework to decide who can contribute and who can't. And all of that is a robust process, which I'm not part of. But I would love to be in a place where everybody in the world understood the value of investing in children, because they're 22% of the population and declining, but 100% of our future. But you have to keep the lights on.
Yeah, I mean.
So if you know somebody who's got a lot of money that has no financial ties to anybody that would be problematic, give them my number. And I'm happy to be able to stand up and say, we don't worsen the carbon footprint. We don't, all of our investments we make decisions that of our shared values. We won't invest in anything that's tobacco. We won't invest in anything that is alcohol. We won't invest, and we will not have those people as partners. Vaccines save lives.
Yeah. I mean, Dr. Kressly, I guess, is it just a necessary part that the AAP must collaborate with industry? Yes or no? I mean, in a short.
Industry, yes. Can we pick and choose depending on what it looks like? Yes, and we have a framework to do that.
And can you reassure people or explain to people that there are conflicts of interest policies, there are guardrails? Are there, ways that we can, have industry partnership that, isn't inherently corrupt? I mean, just because you have industry partnership doesn't mean it's corrupt.
That's correct. We do this as individuals. We invest in stocks and bonds if you're trying to save for retirement, right? And so sometimes that money comes from places and all of that. But we have a very robust conflict of interest policy where you would actually.
But did you ever stop somebody from serving on a committee?
Yeah. There are people who come to us all the time and say, we want to fund this. And we're like, yeah, no, you don't share our values.
Can you give me an example?
Influence it. I would be giving you conjecture and misspeaking, and I don't want to misrepresent things. But yes, we have turned down money. We have turned down money from individuals and corporations who we don't think have aligned goals and mission. And the conflict of interest policy is very robust. And the financial side of the house, where that money goes to, versus our operational money, where dues go to that pay for clinical recommendations and policy making, are completely separate.
I just wanted to zoom out, Sue, because I think that this is something that's come up a lot, where different organizations have different, member fees, different relationships with industry partners. It raises a really important problem. Even if we have conflict of interest disclosures, this is a problem for pediatrics, for public health, certainly. How do you envision a world where we can separate those entirely? Because if those organizations want to donate for whatever reason, and there's no back and forth to an organization, is there a need for a firewall, something in between? And isn't that what taxes to the government are meant to do. And so doesn't this come back to the role of ACIP and individual organizations? Do you see a path forward to maybe disentangle this frustration for people when they look at it from the outside?
I would love to sit and model that out. The reality is that we live in a capitalistic society. I mean, if we lived in a place where there was national health care and everybody got health care for free, and we'd be in a whole different ballpark. That's not where we live. We live in a place where there are financial interests in everything. And I wish that people just could, out of their generosity and see what we see, which is to donate from their heart because they want to make sure that every kid thrives in every community. But I also don't think it looks the same for every piece of this. So I would love to sit down and model it. And so the flip question to this is, what would happen if the AAP didn't exist because we didn't have enough funds to do our work?
Well, let me iterate on that because I think that's a great point. It's almost like there's so much industry out there. It's just like the one industry that is the sponsor are pharmaceutical companies that manufacture a product administered by, it makes it difficult in a time when people are not trusting institutions. I mean, I was joking with a friend about this, that like, and again, this is like a completely cockamamie idea, Dr. Kressly, but what if it was like, I don't know, like Wegmans or like Walmart or like
Give
fucking...
Give them our number. We'll like.
But do you know what I'm saying? Like it's the fact that it's like the makers of the vaccines that are giving it to you guys that are going to make it really freaking hard to trust that you're not working on their behalf.
Right.
But Brenda, you're assuming they don't have a shared mission. These vaccine companies, they have a shared mission, right? They want to vaccines are proven to be safe, effective, changing the world that we live in. We have them making the vaccines. This is a natural partnership. I think it's not necessarily okay to just assume bad intent just because there is a money exchange of some sort. It's collaboration. I mean, I know that sounds a little bit like, just completely bought by pharma, but it's the reality of the world.
No, it's really small. It's really what led to us when we say yes or no. I'm telling you, we have a framework that says, do we have shared vision? Do we have shared values?
Yeah.
How much involvement can you have? Will we not accept your money? Will you accept your money, but there's a firewall and you can't be here? All of those things are part of the process. And if there were more people willing to give us money, would we think differently? Maybe. But you're right about the vaccine manufacturers, right? Like they're not all evil out there. They're there to protect your child, and how many vaccines are given for free in third world countries to stop outbreaks?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're getting at the point that is crucial, which is like we can't just be slinging allegations around without real supportive evidence of a corruptive behavior on the part, if we feel like there is, on the part of vaccine manufacturers as well as these medical societies. But I'm just here to say, like, there is mistrust of vaccine companies. There's nothing we can say on one episode that's just going to make that go away with a magic wand. What drug companies have done, have pushed opioids on this country, and then like a year later, COVID happens, and then suddenly we're expected to trust these drug makers. Like, that's a tall order to ask. And on the flip side, you've got supplement makers and you've got the wellness influencers and all those guys too. And I'm here to say, like, I mistrust anybody selling a product who's then going to say that, like, and then go use the product. But I'm just saying that this is something I think that could be worthwhile to explore, diversifying where those donations come from, because it's a bad look. I wish it wasn't, Sue. I really wish it wasn't, but I'm just being honest and delivering the message here.
No, we hear it. But I will also, if you look further out, right, there's a lot of noise and chaos. It's overwhelming to everyone. It's overwhelming to families for sure. And I don't know that we build trust from the top down. Trust is relational. And my families don't have a relationship with the American Academy of Pediatrics. They have a relationship with Sue Kressly, who they can call or text and say, I'm scared. And I will show up for them every time. and be there with them. And so I don't think we can solve the trust it's got to be personal. It's got to be us partnering with families. And then we can have these conversations, but also to be curious and say, so tell me what you're worried about, right? And so if they want to say to me, then I would look to them and say, what program would you like me to cut? Here it is. Right? We all have a budget we have to live within, and those are hard things. Now, it's interesting. My mom used to say to me, if you want to know what people care about and value, look at their checkbook and look at their calendar. It's where they spend time and it's where they spend their money. And if you would look at the vast majority of people who are contributing to the AAP, it's a no-brainer.
My calendar shows that I spend most of my time in my kids' ballet rehearsal and my kids' soccer practice.
Yep, because you value your kids. You value your kids. That's what that tells me. Which
it's where my checkbook goes too, Sue. Tom, you had something.
Because you value your children.
Yes.
And so to every parent who's listening, kudos. You got it right. People talk about who's failing the kids, not parents. Because they're showing up with their calendar and their budget and investing in kids. Now, how can we convince the rest of the world? When you look at public policy, how much of that goes in whatever industry? Education, medicine, how much of that goes to the kids, which are 100% of the future? So instead of arguing, let's stand locked arms with families, because it's going to take both of us together to change the world to make it a better place for your kids and mine.
All right. We want to tap into your worries. So we're going to play What is Sue Kressly worried about the most? It's a new game.
I live in Florida, another hurricane.
Just briefly, when I say this, tell me what goes through your mind. So again, the ACIP head, Kirk Milhoan, said that he wants the committee to revisit COVID vaccine safety in their next meeting in February. What do you hear?
Eroding confidence. I really think that in the name of transparency and inducing, building confidence, the exact opposite is happening. And so it is, I don't know that we have shared goals and shared values in what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to keep kids safe and healthy. I don't know what they're trying to do, but it's certainly not strengthening our vaccine infrastructure and healthcare delivery for kids and communities.
But they say they do want to keep kids healthy and safe. That's what they say.
That's what he says. I know he says that. Is looking at actions speaking louder than words.
The state of Florida is advancing legislation that would allow parents to exempt their kids, or at least apply for an exemption for their kids from vaccine requirements at school based on their conscience. So this is different than medical reason. This is different from religious reason. This is based on conscience. If that passes, what's your worry?
That it spreads like measles and is everywhere. But let's unpack that a little bit. Because parents already have the right to decline vaccines. That right already exists. What about the rights and the freedom of parents whose children can't get vaccinated? They're infants and too young. They're on chemotherapy. They have immune compromised. We have then trampled on their rights to be able to be a functioning part of the community and attend public school. And so we are not making those parents have any additional rights. To me, we are taking away the rights of the people that we as pediatricians are part of the population of all kids deserve to be safe.
All right, last one. We hear this a lot. You say informed consent, so I engage in that and I decide not to take up a vaccine for my child. And then I'm kicked out of my pediatrician's practice. Does that worry you that that's occurring?
Yes, and We have to look at the question behind the question and be curious, not judgmental. Why did that pediatrician feel like that? They were, believe me, it was not their first choice. So I'm going to tell you a story. Indulge me. When I opened up my own practice, in the practice that I was in before, because I was the person who gave people my cell phone and was there for families, I had the most vulnerable patients, kids who are home on ventilators, home ventilator dependent because they were premature or had prematurity problems. 2 kids who had solid organ transplants, a liver and a heart transplant, who are immunocompromised and can't ever be vaccinated. I had kids undergoing chemotherapy. And I had those parents reach out to me and say, can you promise me that you will keep me safe in your office? Because I'm scared. The practice that you're now in, I am frightened to sit in the waiting room because I know that there's sick people there and some of them aren't vaccinated. Can you promise me that you're going to keep my child safe? And that's an impossible ask. I watched a former preemie come to my office with RSV, who I helicoptered to the children's hospital, who didn't go home. And so, yes, I understand, and it does worry me because every child deserves access. But we all have a part to play in the system, which is making it very difficult to keep every child safe. Pediatricians think about your child in front of us first, and we'll do what's ever right by your child. But then we also think about every child in your community, even the ones you can't see. And we lose sleep at night worrying about your child and the other children.
Dr. Kressly, you talked about that the AAP used to be in the medical lane and that you relied on the agencies for the public health, being a pillar of support. And now the AAP finds itself.
And I'm confused. ACIP or AAP?
AAP. I heard you say once that, AAP used to be in the medical lane, kind of what you're talking about here, describing about in the exam room and how we care for patients and, that kind of concrete, real life experience, and that you relied on the public health agencies to be a pillar to kind of support you there. Who is going to fill that void if you're not going to partner with public health right now?
I don't have an answer to that question. It does make me lose sleep at night. What I'm really hoping is that we can find a way to get back to realigning and trusting each other, because the children of this country and the health of America depends on everyone working together for the benefit of people.
And then one more thing, you talked about the moving story of you're going to vaccinate your child because of the kid who can't get vaccinated. And we actually posed that question to Dr. Milhone, and he said this to us. He said, well, what about this, Dr. Kressly? You gave your kid a vaccine because, the neighbor's kid couldn't get vaccinated, but now your kid got a vaccine side effect. Is it that kid's fault now, that the immunocompromised kid's fault that now your kid got a vaccine injury? And how do you square that? How does that work if you're vaccinating for somebody else and you have that bad luck and get a vaccine injury?
So no, it's nobody's fault. There is nothing in the world that is completely risk-free. And we know that some people have side effects. Thankfully, they're incredibly rare and usually self-resolving and minor, not always. And so there is part of the whole decision is risk-benefit, right? How do we make those public health decisions about other things that we choose to do? What do we do about speed limits? What do we do about other things that we make decisions about to shore up populations? It is not that child's fault, but it is our collective societal's responsibility to respond to that family and make sure that they get what they need.
Dr. Kressly, final question. You had rightly said that people don't necessarily have a relationship with AAP. They have a relationship with their individual pediatricians. But here we are, the AAP taking actions, asking people to follow their recommendations as opposed to the CDC's recommendations, filing lawsuits, deciding not to show up at meetings because it doesn't feel like a process may not be followed. Why should the American people trust the AAP?
Because it's made up of individual members, often volunteer leaders, who bring your child from the exam room to the level of policy so that we are stronger together and can advocate on behalf of the nation's children.
One more final question.
Yeah.
Is there something that you think that the AAP can do better to reach out to those people that may not trust? Recommendations or kind of where it's coming from. We talked about the pharmaceutical stuff, regardless of what we think of where it's coming from. Is there something you think that the AAP could be doing better right now?
Yes, I think we all could be doing better. And I think that we're working on it. We are gathering data about improving confidence in different communities. And it's not a one size fits all. As you know, people come at this with their own experience. People come to the doctor's office with their prior experience, whatever you experienced. So we have to get better about not only broadly speaking about things, but nuancing messaging. And we are working very hard to really improve the skills of communication and building trust with families among our members so that can then filter down to your community and hopefully your pediatrician's office.
Dr. Sue Kressly of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Listen, this was a really good conversation. I know that this is a tough moment, I think, for this country. Just want to thank you for joining us on Why Should I Trust You?
Thanks. And can I just close with something?
Sure.
So pediatricians have hope because we deal with kids and curiosity and hopefulness every day. And so what I hope for everyone who's listening is look at life through the eyes of your child, who no matter what they're struggling for, still finds some small part of joy. And what we know is that human connection is what keeps them feel safe, stable, nurtured, and helps them to thrive. So put a smile on a kid's face today because you'll make a difference. And then we have a hopeful for all of us for tomorrow.
Dr. Kressly, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that was Why Should I Trust You? Please send us questions, comments to questions@whyshoulditrustyou.net. Look us up, Substack, our website, our podcast, our I don't know what else. Merch, other stuff. I am Brenda Akari. He is Tom Johnson. She is Maggie Bartlett. He is Dr. Mark Abdul Malik. And we will see you right back here next week.